All right. Well, it's another football season starting for us, and that means UND football once again gets their season underway, and it'll be against Drake to start off the year. And before we really get into the matchup, uh, Tom, where do you see, just projection wise, how do you see this UND football team playing out this year?
Yeah, well, it's a difficult schedule. So you're trying to take the next step in where you fit in the FCS landscape. I think UND and its fans would like to elevate into that next tier. They become kind of an annual playoff team, but haven't made a lot of noise in the playoffs. Um, the problem with that is that North Dakota every year plays North Dakota State and South Dakota State, which happen to be the number one team in the country and the number two team in the country. So UND is going to play the Mountain West favorite Boise State. You're going to play the number one FCS team in the country and the number two FCS team in the country. So, unless you upset somebody there in that stretch, you're looking at three losses, and you're looking at a road playoff game that gives you an uphill battle. So North Dakota's in a pretty good place as it compares last season to this season in terms of likely progress. But it's a tough deck stacked against them a little bit.
And then just from your perspective to what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've talked about with those inside of the program, what do you feel maybe is more pressing for them? Is it kind of getting out of that 7-4 purgatory, or is it more so trying to find some sort of postseason success?
Yeah, I think those things go hand in hand. I think they realized down the stretch last year when they gave up 300 plus rushing yards and five or six scores to North Dakota State and Weber State that it needed to be able to handle itself on the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively better, which maybe sounds a little obvious in the game of football, but that's where UND was at a clear disadvantage. And I think UND has taken some nice steps towards addressing that defensively. UND brought in 315-pound nose guard from Northern Illinois who will start on Saturday in Jeffrey Griffin Jr., and then brought in a 270-pound defensive end, Jake Saltonstall, who will mix in at defensive end. And so that's on the defensive side of things. I think on the offensive side of things, UND's in its best place at the offensive line that it's been in a while. UND started at Nebraska last year with three guys we really knew nothing about in Peyton Lotus, Sam Hagan, and Braden Bryant. And so I think as the page turns to 2023, four of the five have a very solid base of what you can expect out of them, and have an ability to progress because they're all young. But yeah, I think UND is just in a much different place in the line of scrimmage, and that's what's going to take to challenge South Dakota State and North Dakota State.
And then looking at maybe this week, you know, especially that defensive line you mentioned, obviously improved, but somewhat unproven for the most part. Going up against a pretty experienced offensive line with Drake, what does success, look like to you in your eyes for this, new and improved defensive line?
Yeah, I think we're gonna chew around the edges of some answers in this game against Drake. I thought the last time these two teams played in 2021, UND was pretty poor, um, even though they won 38-0. It kind of just shows you on which different ends of kind of the FCS spectrum those teams sit right now. Not to say that Drake hasn't given UND and even FBS teams a scare, because they have. But I would be very surprised if that was the case here on Saturday afternoon. I just think Drake has struggled to score points against North Dakota in the Alaris Center. Even the one game that came down to 21-18 in 2015 after UND beat Wyoming. UND had jumped out to a 21-0 lead and then ended up giving up 18 points. But other than that, there's two zeros Drake is putting up in the last 10 years against UND and a 7. So they're going to have a tough time against UND's defensive front, but maybe it's an opportunity to build some confidence, some experience, and just get out there. It's I'm certainly not going to crown their defense champion if they pitch a shutout here.
Mhm. And then offensively too, obviously last time out against Drake, you had Isaiah Smith and Luke Skokna have some pretty successful days. Just this year too, how much does it go for the success of UND's running game if Luke Skokna is able to be healthy and be able to contribute offensively?
Yeah, Skokna really left Drake in the dust a couple times in that game. That might be one of his few 100-yard games in his career, even though he's had a very productive career for North Dakota. Um, but Luke's had his moments of being banged up this fall camp. I think it's been minor so far, not the drawn out thing that he suffered in 2022. But I think that Luke Skokna might be more effective week 3 than he'll be week 1. I'm curious to see. I think what you really see is, when Luke Skokna shows off his speed against Drake, you could just tell that Drake didn't have the defenders to keep pace with that speed. So I'm curious to see the Red Wilson jet sweep. I know UND will use plenty of Isaiah Smith and Gavin Zebarth, but I think it's those speed guys that really separate against a non-scholarship program like Drake. They just don't have the dudes to hang with some of the speedier guys at the full FCS scholarship level.
Hmm. And before we get into kind of just predictions for this week 1 game, who are some of your wild cards maybe that you're looking out for? So along the season this year, both on offense and defense.
Yeah, wild card. Boy, I've written a lot about Nate DeMontenac, sophomore wide receiver out of Canada, who will have a greater opportunity with the departure of Garrett Mogg and Marcus Preston. But I could also go with Elijah Klein, the 6'6" product out of Mandan, who anybody who's watched practice has seen almost a comical way he can dominate. Just a jump ball it seems so easy for him. Now, North Dakota has just had an incredibly difficult time getting him to Saturdays. He's had multiple hip surgeries. He's been so beat up. I'm just super curious if UND can get him to a place where he can be very effective in the red zone. If UND gets in the red zone and you see 16 on the field, they're going jump ball to him. And it's going to be fun to watch. The wild card defensively for me, oh boy. I'm really high on Antonio Blewett, a cornerback out of Buffalo, Minnesota. UND will start CJ Siegel and Edmund Okanzie at corner. I project Blewett to potentially be a starter, but UND is also going to play a ton of nickel coverage this year, I think. That's going to allow CJ Siegel to roam a little bit more, and that'll allow Antonio Blewett to see the field. I think he's got the athleticism and body type that they've been missing at corner when they lost Caleb Nelson transferred to Sacramento State.
Nice, nice. And then yeah, just week 1. What are your maybe a final score prediction? What are you expecting at the Alara Center?
Yeah, boy. I'll go something like 52-10. I think North Dakota is going to be very explosive. Um, I think if you played poorly with multiple fumbles and beat Drake 38-0 a couple years ago, I think this team is better than that team. So I just think if Trey Feeney isn't playing a lot of snaps at quarterback in the fourth quarter, something went wrong for North Dakota in this one. So that's what I'll be watching for.
All right, sounds good. It'll be a 3 p.m. kickoff, and it'll be on Midcoast Sports. It'll be on 96.1 FM, and you can also follow along throughout the day on the Herald website. Be sure to check it out with Tom. Thanks again, Tom, and we'll see you again next week, hopefully.
Sounds good. Absolutely.